So I'm going to discuss a little bit, putting some emphasis on visual and multimodal disinformation detection. Some aspects are very similar and relevant to the presentation before. Let me also start with a little bit of historical background. Yes, actually, what we are discussing is a challenge as old as time. Even from the beginning of the mankind, there was disinformation, spreading false information with intention from the devil to Eve, and then Eve continued with misinformation. And as was discussed, it is much harder today because we have the social media and the internet in general, and it is much faster and easier and more effective and quicker to spread false information quickly and widely. And it is also possible nowadays to address specific communities, and this enhances the effect because based on confirmation bias, when people receive content that they are related to, they tend to believe it more easily. Of course, also, as we will see, the rise of generative AI has made things much more, on one hand, easier to generate content, and on the other hand, much harder to detect. There is also a more general worldwide political and let's say society situation where political polarization and the erosion of trust in traditional media, government, science has created in general an environment which disinformation can thrive. The financial and behavioral models of online platforms where they promote engagement at all costs, and as also has been discussed, disinformation campaigns are now often used, let's say, as weapons, as tools, as methodology by governments and other organizations in order to manipulate opinion and undermine processes and other organizations. And yes, as we discussed, for the AI generative content, the challenge is that the supply of disinformation will soon already can be infinite. And things are much more difficult because we are not discussing about isolated false items, but organized campaigns where AI agents can create thousands of personas which can generate their own content and address specific communities and so on. So it becomes more and more complicated. And just to remind to all of us that although it has been discussed and it is well known that the impact can be very high, it is not just about or anymore about irony, a form of art, parody, and so on. It attacks fundamental human rights like democracy when the public is misled during elections, internal and external security when they are using during wars and disasters, financial interest, as we have seen, personal reputations, public health, for example, during the COVID pandemic and so on. There are already some estimations from organizations about the cost, the financial cost, like, for example, 30 billion for organizations that they have to spend in order to protect themselves from misinformation and disinformation. I will skip this. And yes, there are already, again, very well justified journalism studies which shows that indeed there are organizations which offer disinformation as a service during elections and so on. And the Commission, European Commission, is doing a lot towards to mitigate and fight this by suggesting and promoting a series of actions, regulations, documents, committees, and so on. DSA, of course, plays an important part of it. I will skip this educational part. It is another important topic. And I will go a little bit on the topic that we are working on. and it is visual disinformation and deep fakes. You see a famous example here, the Pope wearing a modern jacket, an impressive one, like it is the usual case in such synthetic generated content. So visual information is also very dangerous because it can be more persuasive, it generates attention, and as was very well presented in our first talk, it can generate feelings maybe more directly by seeing an image. It also becomes more tempting to share because it is impressive. It doesn't need translation and so on. And here I already give a first example on some distortions that this synthetic generated content have or used to have, and what we are trying to detect with our algorithms. Things started 20 years ago in a more simple way. For example, there is this famous shark, maybe you have seen it. The photo on the left is an original one. Indeed, this kayaker was followed by this huge shark. And then this shark was isolated very easily by, let's say, Photoshop and other kind of editing, photo editing tools, and was inserted within cities during floodings to spread fake news and disinformation that there are sharks during floods in New York, Puerto Rico, and so on. And by image processing techniques, it could be quite easily detected that this is an inserted object and that the image has been manipulated. Other examples, you can see here examples where which have to do with editing of images to generate a false message. And towards this, some years ago, we have created a tool which combines 15 image analysis algorithms and a user interface, and someone who is interested in detecting whether the image is manipulated or not could see the results in various techniques, because not each one and every one of them performs well in every case. We also had combination, fusion of results, and as we will see in most of our tools, a high level of interactivity where the user can in a more detail check specific regions and so on. But with synthetic content and deep fakes, nowadays things have become much more difficult. So you know that deep neural networks are used to manipulate mostly human faces, transfer faces from one person to the video to another person with high realism. You can see here a synthetic video of Tom Cruise. It's not Tom Cruise here itself, or another example here. So the level of realism keeps going on, and excuse me, yes, with now big models like Sora, we can generate almost anything. And going back, I will skip this. Going back to the famous shark, let's see how things nowadays can look like with the latest, almost latest release from Google VO3, which is particularly good for generating videos of riots, conflict, disasters, and so on. So it is very good for disinformation related to journalism and the news. So you see, during these 20 years, the shark has become much more realistic. And we have reached now a point where humans cannot anymore reliably detect synthetic content. So it is a 50-50% chance that a human can detect whether something is AI generated or not. Of course, before moving to how we can detect this, there is, let's say, another side to this story. There is a very recent study that says that, okay, as we have more and more AI-generated content, people start being more critical to such kind of images. So they start, let's say, not believe what they see as it used to be. So it is, let's say, a new direction where AI synthesized images, this large-scale AI synthesized images, from being a problem, starts bringing some kind, let's say, of a positive impact as well by making the users critical towards such kind of content. But still needs, of course, we need a lot to do before this is not the solution. Okay, more examples about financial losses or use of deepfakes during war. For example, in the beginning of the Ukraine war with Russia with Ukraine, there were deepfake videos from both leaders that they are stopping the war or something relevant. And what we are doing, what is general being done in these cases is that we are using deep learning architectures, using networks and architectures like convolutional neural networks or visual transformers and several kind of representations. These are trained with false and negative examples, and then these kind of networks try to learn some characteristics, some artifacts in order to detect whether something is synthesized or not. Here is an example on what could be detected automatically by the algorithm: asymmetries, artifacts in earrings, hairs, and so on. But things keep improving. So, for example, the earrings problem that used to be one indication for detection, it's no longer the case. So it is like an arms race where detectors try to learn things, but on the other hand, the generated content becomes more and more realistic. We have developed tools where they are using such detectors in order to identify scores of whether something is deepfake or not. And again, we have seen with end users, we work a lot with journalists, we have seen that the score and the detection itself is not sufficient. There has to be a lot of interactivity and possibility for deep inspection, so the journalist or any other, the fact checker, can browse through the content and through the scores in order to also have human in the loop and identify whether something indeed provides enough evidence for being manipulated or not. Other forms of tools, again, with visualization and interactivity playing a significant role. And here, similarly for synthetic image detection. So again, the score itself, it's not enough. Another type of misinformation that we have been working on, it was presented very nicely in the previous presentation, is where we have both images and the text together. And usually what is being done, either the image or the text is out of context. So for example, if we see here at the right, we have a photo, and the real case is that President Obama is visiting a United States lab to be informed about an Ebola vaccine, but the image can be taken completely out of context and used in a false item where President Obama is supposed to visit the Wuhan lab in China where COVID might have started. So here we have worked a lot, and there is also also from other researchers a lot of work on how to detect this out of context misinformation, which is very effective and difficult to detect. So again, deep learning, image text pairs, modality representation, fusion in this case, optimization of the model, learning in order to detect whether something is true or not. And we see here a number of techniques for all these steps. Evidence-based detection, where additional information is retrieved from internet or trusted sources or other databases to see whether either the image or the text has been used before, and then again train a detector to identify this. And then datasets are very important in such kind of work, because we need well annotated datasets, both positive and negative ones. And there is a lot of work on how to create representative and efficient and rich enough representative datasets. And there is also work on this. And again, we have provided tools like location estimation or search by visual similarity in order to help work with cases where known images are used in other locations or known images are used with different kind of text and so on. I won't go into details. There are more specific techniques we have been working on to improve such approaches. As I told you, we have been working on how to generate more realistic synthetic training data, and they are very important, like null AI techniques, of course, by using the same classifiers and by using the same classifier with a more representative data sets, results can improve a lot. And recently, I skip all this, we are working after AI for media in a new project. It's called the Elliot, where we try to combine most of the things that I have shown before with large-scale multimodal foundation models in order to detect end-to-end fact-checking, including not only detection, but also justification on why an item is considered mis or disinformation. Just one slide. It's a big project. It's recently started. It's not only about disinformation. It's general about multimodal foundation models, but disinformation is one of the use cases. And by just closing 2-3 minutes, of course, we need tools to fight this phenomenon, because by using human skills enough is not efficient, because the amount is high. But we also need, as Virginia mentioned, we also need education and media literacy from younger, but also for all ages, to understand the phenomenon, to develop critical thinking, to know what is being used for disinformation and how to spot it, using, for example, more specific content for younger ages, or specific techniques like this one they suggest, like let's say a vaccine for disinformation. Some countries like Estonia are doing very well on this. Like it was mentioned again by Sophia in the first presentation, to understand human behavior and the role of feelings and other societal dynamics, human and societal dynamics around it, is also important, because it doesn't help to just blame the other side, especially in cases of conspiracy theories, and create a kind of dichotomy. Policies and laws, of course, they are needed, as mentioned, together with the technical solutions. And again, The Commission is doing a lot in other countries towards this direction. Recently, they are trying and thinking of even using influencers in order to help towards this. So let's say use the same tools or methodologies that might be used for disinformation to also use it against. And watermarking and content credentials is another directions. And they are adopted by several other manufacturers or content handlers. So yes, because I think I'm over time, I skip this. This is our related projects, my colleagues who contributed, and yes, thank you very much for the attention.
So, thank you for moderating this roundtable. I'm from Grenoble, and I'm a professor in Grenoble in intellectual property law and also in digital regulation law. And I will speak about and try to address this critical challenge facing our democracy, it was said before. How can we effectively combat disinformation through the regulatory framework and also with, you said in your question, technological tools? More specifically, I will be exploring two frameworks. The first one is the European one, and the other one is the French one. And these two frameworks have done to address this issue and how we can translate these this legal provision into concrete technological solutions. So today I will focus merely on disinformation rather than on misinformation. I will focus on disinformation because it's referring on intentional dissemination of false information and deliberate manipulation rather than misinformation. So let me switch on first the European framework, and I begin with this European regulatory landscape, which was pioneered comprehensive approaches to this challenge. The first regulation, the cornerstone of European regulation is the Digital Service Act that you mentioned previously, adopted in October 2022. And this is truly landmark legislation that fundamentally reshapes on how online platforms must address harmful content. The DSA takes what I call a dual approach to disinformation. The first, it treats certain disinformation as a legal content to all online intermediaries must combat. This applies when false information violates existing laws, for instance, or such as defamation or fraud statutes. But more innovatively, the DSA also addresses disinformation as socially harmful content, even when it's not technically illegal. For this category, special obligation apply to what we call very large online platforms, and also for very large online search engines. There are services with more than 45 million monthly active users in EU. Think to Facebook, YouTube, Google, TikTok are a very large online platform or very large online search engines. This graduated approach is crucial in the European regulation. It recognizes that not on all platforms have the same capacity or present the same systemic risk. a small blog hosting service shouldn't face the same regulatory burden as a global social media giant as Meta or as YouTube. So there is a very opportune difference between the small blog and the very large online platform, and the regulatory requirements scale with this platform size and the potential impact. What are the risks? The regulation is a risk-based regulation. So what exactly must the very large platform do? The DSA introduced what's called a risk-based regulatory model centered on two core obligations. The first one is the risk assessment in the Article 34, and the second one is the risk mitigation in the Article 35. First, the risk assessment, what is it? The very large online platform or very large research engines requires to conduct annual assessments of systemic risk stemmed for their service. This information is explicitly listed into this systemic risk. Plus, platform must examine how their design, their algorithms, and also the business models might amplify the false information. The second is the risk mitigation at the Article 35. And this article requires that platform to implement reasonable and proportionate and also effective measures to address the risk that they have identified. Importantly, this measure must respect fundamental rights, particularly freedom of expression. And beyond this core of requirements, platform must also submit to independent audits, provide also data address to vet researcher, for instance, and maintain always transparency about their content moderation practices. This creates a very strong ecosystem of accountability that goes far beyond the old, in the past, noticed and takedown for the platform. And with this legislation, we also have the Code of Practice of Disinformation, and this framework translates this into concrete action, and the Code of Practice is crucial for translating into concrete action. The code was established in 2018 as a voluntary self-regulatory instrument, a tool, bringing together platform advertisers, fact-checkers, and also civil society. It was significantly strengthened in 2022 with the DSA, because there is a very important development in February 2025. Just a few months ago, the European Commission officially integrated the Code of Practice on Disinformation into the DSA framework. It becomes then fully operational the 1st of July 2025. This transformation from voluntary to mandatory is significant. The code now contains 44 specific commitments and 128 detailed measures covering everything from demonetizing disinformation sources to answering transparency, political advertising, to empowering users with better tools to recognize false content. Let me give some concrete example. Platforms must cut financial, you addressed previously this question, incentives for disinformation purveyors, for preventing ad placement, for instance, next to false content. They must label political advertising clearly, showing who paid for it and how much was spent for this. They strengthen measures against fake accounts and bot-driven amplification. They must provide better data access to researchers and also expand fact-checking coverage across all EU member states and languages. Importantly, the code includes measurable key performance indicators, KPI, and strong monetary frameworks. Platform designed with the DSA now report every 6 months on their implementation, and it's just aspirational policy, but it's a real enforceable compliance. The second, I go faster. The second regulation is on AI Act. The major piece of this European regulation from June 2024, which especially addresses the question of deepfake, particularly on the Article 50, it establishes a transparency obligation. Anyone generating deepfake defined as, this is the most important impact of AI Act. We have a definition of deepfake, defined as AI manipulated content resembling real person or event, must clearly disclose that content is artificially created. This applied, of course, to image, but also for audio and also for video. There is an important exception for artistics and satirical works, and this disclosure must not hamper the work's display or enjoyment. The balance between the protection against deception and the freedom of artistic exception is very important. I move to the French framework. France has been proactive with 2 key laws. The first one is the fake news law in electoral context in 2018, and this law focuses on electoral periods, the 3 months before elections. It's creating emergency injunction procedures, allowing courts to order cessation of false information, strengthening electoral integrity. And importantly, the Constitutional Council required that falsity must be manifest, clearly evident, and protecting legitimate political debate. The law also mandates platform transparency during the election, disclosing advertiser identities and spending, and giving regulators power to suspend foreign state-controlled media spreading disinformation. More recently, we also have the 2024 SREN law addresses deepfake specifically. It modified the article, a specific article of the criminal code to cover algorithmically generated content. Publishing deepfakes without the consent carries 1 year of imprisonment and 15,000 euros fine, doubled for social media distribution. And there is also a specific article for that targets, especially on sexual deepfake online, on pornographic deepfake, and also targeting women. Challenges. What are the most important challenges? The first one for me is definitional ambiguity. Distinguishing disinformation from the opinion remains contested. The second one is on technological evolution detection. AI advances faster than regulation, and regulation need to be flexible and adaptable. And the third is on enforcement complexity. The DSA is quite flexible, but it creates a very large framework with a lot of provision, and it could create some uncertainty. The fourth is online platform resistance. We have seen withdrawals from voluntary commitments like X pulling out of the code. And then the last one is the fundamental rights balance. We must, on the first part, combat harm, while also we need to preserve free expression and avoiding general monitoring. And it's difficult to find the right balance in between these two rights. Despite these challenges, the framework provides a solid foundation in Europe and also in France system. And now the question is, your question is about implementation and about technological tools. In Grenoble, we submitted a project called Altea project. In that project, we try to translate regulatory mandates into actionable technology. Altea starts with an interesting framework extending Turing's imitation games as generative AI has become widespread. We now face two new games. The first one is the faker game. In this content generated by computer or human. This addresses AI specifically with the Article 50 on the AI Act, and we need systems identifying and labeling synthetic content. And the second game is the Frogger game. The question is, has this generated content used real world elements, someone's face or voice, for instance? This addresses also the copyright question, but also the personality rights under the French system, but also under the European system. And they are not just concepts, they provide structured way to design the detection of algorithms that map directly into legal obligation. In this multidisciplinary approach that we have in Altea's project distinctive is we need multidisciplinary integration of computer scientists, legal researcher, and also management researcher. And we have also the pleasure to work with Eleonore and Fujitsu on that project. And the question is, computer sciences develop detection algorithm and technical system. How we build this for legal researcher, translate regulatory requirements into technical specification. What must we do to comply? That's the main question. And while answering this solution in the respect of civil, criminal, and fundamental rights. And the last question is for management researchers who design operational frameworks. How do we actually deploy this organization? You can combat this information working in only one domain. And for instance, a brilliant algorithm violating privacy law is useless. Legally perfect framework that's technically impossible achieves is nothing. And an elegant solution no organization can deploy might as well not exist. Altea creates an integrated solution with this simultaneous, technically sound, legally compliant, and also operationally feasible. And we have tools, but I don't have time to develop. So thank you for your attention.
I'm very pleased. We are actually very close to finishing the project. It formally ends at the end of January. So this is actually a very good moment to present what we have found out. The project has been it started at the beginning of 2023, just at the moment where generative AI literally exploded in our face. Originally, we wanted to investigate generative adversarial networks and how they may pose a threat but also opportunity for democratic engagement. But since the very beginning, it was clear that guns were only a little part of the much bigger world of generative AI. Just to give you an idea, my slides are not moving. Okay, now they are moving. We are a very international consortium, but this is just built into the rules of the European projects. What I would like rather to highlight how much we are interdisciplinary, and I want especially to emphasize the collaboration between the humanities and social science approach with more technically oriented subjects, and also the presence of journalism and media and citizen science. So you will see, I will explain throughout why it is important to keep in mind this interdisciplinary perspective and what good it can bring to these discussions on disinformation. We had three objectives: understanding the technical and sociopolitical potentials of generative AI, especially for the production and spreading of audiovisual content. We are now busy with the middle one, which is the regulatory innovation for Gen AI risk mitigation. But this was also part of a third objective, which is the co-design of value-based AI-generated outputs. And this really is about your question, Virginia, about can we do anything good with it? I'm going to focus especially on the understanding part and the potential positive part of AI-generated content, and especially audiovisual contents. To give you a bit of a background, when we started the project, we begin with a listing those that were circulating, and you don't need to read the details of this spreadsheet that we started compiling. But what became very, very clear immediately was that they are not all alike. They are very different in terms of their goals, whether they are authorized, whether there is disclosure, what function they perform, etc., etc., etc. So just mapping initially how diverse the deepfake creation can be made it clear for us that we could not treat deepfakes just as an artifact. So a lot of emphasis and focus has been on the video per se and on its technical characteristics. And we thought instead that we needed foundations and a theoretical approach to address this. And this is what we have called a network approach to deepfakes. And the idea here is that you really need to look at the broader socio-technical system in which a deepfake is part of. So we have to look at how and where it is developed, how it is distributed, what kind of target is there, how it circulates, the user deception, the public discourse that is thereby created, and of course the policy and legislative intervention is also part of this landscape. And as we have said a few times, it takes a village to trust a deepfake, so that is why it is so important to have a broader look at these contents and not just the technical aspects of them. So our first use case focused on the user reception, and we developed a psychometric scale to measure perceived trustworthiness of AI-generated content. What we did is producing ourselves 4 deepfakes, and we also used the 2 real videos. These videos had both positive and negative attitudes. Some had high quality AI content, so really from the technical perspective, and others had low quality. And we manipulated the content in terms of credibility of the source, but also the information, and also at the technical level, mouth movement, the voice, so really the technical aspects. And we picked 2 subjects. One is climate change, focusing on 2 important figures in the debate at the moment, Greta Thunberg and Donald Trump, and for immigration, Justin Trudeau and Viktor Orban. Hopefully it is obvious why we picked these figures to try and have these deepfakes. So what did the study do then? We had over 1,000 adults across 3 countries, and they were exposed, they saw these deepfakes, and we asked questions such as whether the video is real and why they believe the video was real, whether the participants find the video contents trustworthy, whether the video aligned with the individual's general political orientation, and in case it promotes positive or negative attitudes towards the issue itself, so how it is impacting their own perception of the contents. And also the question was whether they would further share the content that they had just seen. And here I'm going to give you some results. The one take-home message is that even low-quality deepfakes are hard to detect. We were not surprised that some high-quality ones were a bit harder, but I think what is really impressive is that people are, this is what the study shows, we are generally quite bad at finding out whether these videos are deepfakes or not. I could also show you some statistics about what happened with the real videos, and what I find interesting with the real videos is that people are uncertain. At some point they don't really know. So for some deepfakes it is easier to understand, but still we are bad. Now, one thing that clearly emerged from the data analysis is that having enough media literacy helps. It helps not exactly because one could have more tools to look through some of the technicalities that also Yiannis was explaining in the previous presentation. But nonetheless, there is a bias affecting the judgment. So we are still influenced by our prior political opinion and ideas, whether we feel we are closer to one figure rather than another. And so it is not obvious to establish connections between liking, believing in a video and that sharing, although clearly these things are deeply interconnected, and people perhaps click on the share button way too easily, which goes back to questions about media literacy, not in the sense of the technicalities, but in the sense of an ethos that we should have when we are online. And so personal attitudes drive our intentions to share, and that's why it is important to work at the level of literacy, not just for the technical aspects. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a glimpse on the empirical research that we have done, and I find it complements very nicely also the research that has been presented by Sophie at least, but also of many others in the panel this morning. Let me then tell you something about the third use case, whether we can use AI-generated content for good, or put otherwise, whether this can be used to enhance digital citizenship, democracy, and all the good things that we want to have in our world. So when you look back at the network map, then we are focusing more on the public discourse, online circulation, and user reception. And so here the question was, can we convey positive messages? Will these messages positively received as well? Here we produced another set of videos, and then we discussed in some workshops with citizens. Now, big pink elephant in the room is what it means, what good means, and what would be, a good ethical goal to pursue. We did have difficult conversations in the consortium, as you can imagine, but we had to start somewhere, and so we thought, okay, let's take the Sustainable Development Goals as a basis. Of course, one can disagree whether these are so universal goals to have, but let's say that they are sufficiently accepted as good goals to obtain. And so we selected 3 of them: good health and well-being, focusing on mental health; gender equality, focusing on women in science; and climate action, focusing on the awareness on this on the climate on climate change. What we did was we created these videos, and here the input from the colleagues in visual semiotics was invaluable, because there was a lot to think about in terms of how to build these videos. Not only the figure that we wanted to use, for instance, for the women in science, we picked Marie Curie and we deepfaked Marie Curie, but for other, the question was, is it better to have a real person that is deepfaked, or is it better to have an avatar, and what kind of characteristics this person should have? So we tried several options. Eventually we had 3 online co-creation workshops with 44 citizens from different European countries, and for each session we showed the video and we discussed the videos, and we tried to monitor the reaction of citizens at the level of the emotional, ethical, but also the aesthetic experience that they had. And we hoped that this would be a way of co-designing AI for good application. Some key insights. It looks like there is a preference for realistic and relatable stories. Interestingly, voice and gestures are perceived to give a lot of credibility and empathy. And also there has been an emphasis on first-person storytelling and interactive formats. Also, transparency on creation process is appreciated, together with authorship and the end goal. And there is this theoretical contribution of how citizens interpret AI media through complex semiotic strategies. So I go back to what I said about the ethical, cognitive, emotional, and also aesthetic part. To cut a very long story short, it seems to us that yes, we can use AI-generated content for promoting good values, societal change, awareness of a number of issues. So this can be done, but it is not obvious at all how or what kind of characteristics such videos should have. So we have to pay a lot of attention to the process of building these videos, and also connecting the first and the further use case that I presented. It seems to me that literacy, not just in the sense of AI or media literacy, but also literacy at the level of argumentation theory, critical thinking skills, is becoming fundamental. I lack space here and time to present to you the second use case, where we had interviews and focus groups with journalists who had a totally different approach to the detection of deep fakes. And most of the time it was not because they were particularly skilled in the technicalities, but because they had a lot of background information and they had other types of filters. I just wanted to say this to you because I find interesting to contrast and compare also users that may have a very different backgrounds. And with this, all our publications and the deliverables are available online at our website. So if you are interested in, you can take a look in there. And follow us, especially on LinkedIn, if you want to know more about the project and what we will do to this to the ending final meeting in January. Thank you.
I have a question, and maybe this is more for Sofia, Lisa, and Federica, but also others might have something to contribute to it. Given that misinformation often spreads because it aligns with human biases, not just because of AI, how do we balance technical solutions with interventions that can address those psychological and social drivers?
If I may, Virginia, because I think this connects to something that I was trying to convey at the very end of my presentation. I think technical solutions are fundamental, but it seems to me that they are also very specialized. So I doubt that this is a solution for the general public. I wouldn't want to think that every one of us needs a deepfake detection tool on their smartphone. So for the general public, I think we really have to work at the level of education, literacy, awareness, and these tools need to be very specific technical tools for specialized part of the profession, from journalism to the finance. It can be used also in a variety of organizations for specific purposes, but I would not want it on my phone.
Sophia, yes.
If I understood your question correctly, is as well that they're not just technological solutions. Obviously, it's a more holistic approach. We are what we are doing in AI and generative AI has to be grounded to different theories, psychological and societal also theories. So our approach is there must be definitely, they have to be informed by behavioral science, and lots of there are lots of research which tries to bridge the behavioral change that we have as humans and the psychology with the solutions that as technology providers we do. I think this becomes more and more a need now, that whatever we produce, it has to be holistic and it has to be very much evaluated by humans. So the alignment basically outcome of the solutions we're providing as technology providers with what the humans expect and how we take into account, you mentioned bias, misinformation, bias in our models, I didn't mention that, is very much culture. So how do I accept something and how my behavior changes? It's not in isolation of where we come from. So LLMs, there's also work as well on culturally based LLMs, and all these things come together. So I think it's a very much a holistic approach, which is a good thing right now. So not isolated, but there are many elements that come to fore when we try to understand misinformation and what actually, how we prevent it.
Yeah, just to add to what Sophia said, I think definitely we shouldn't rely only on technological solutions. Just to bring back the example from the project in Ethiopia, one of the reasons why that remains to be a problem, which is the detection of hate speech in Ethiopia, is because they use low resource languages. So what that means is that the models do not have the context, and as Sophia mentioned as well, culture is really key. So basically these models lack an understanding of the the cultural context in Ethiopia, so that, you know, that's why they're not very good at, even if there are tools which exist, they have LLMs which claim to be multilingual and so on. They don't really perform very well in kind of detecting this kind of harmful content because of a lack of complete understanding of the context. So definitely, so if somehow LLMs can be taught that context or have an awareness, and as Sophia said, this requires a holistic approach, you know, so it's not just technological. So definitely we need to have that capacity to somehow work kind of, you know, in an interdisciplinary manner, so that we have the technology, but we also have the understanding of the culture and the psychology and behavior.
Many thanks, Lisa. We have actually a question in the chat from Jacob Slosser. So this is mainly for Sophia, but again, others might have also something to contribute to. So you're dealing with emotional violence and disinformation, and how you're grounding the classification of affective test, which means how are you classifying false positives and false negatives for any given emotion. And this is particularly in light of the non-universal take on emotions. And Jake is thinking about constructed theories of emotions. And he cited Liza Feldman-Barrett as one of the contributors to this field of research.
So clearly, that's a very interesting question. So so I'm just trying to see how I can answer it in a more sort of certain way. So for the different types of the classifications, for instance, when we were trying to analyze conspiracy theories, for example, and emotions in conspiracy theories, we very much had to define different tasks, which they were also defined by people who were working. Actually, it was from a major European project. And the different tasks, which are not, they were not binary, basically. We're not like, this is a conspiracy, it's not a conspiracy. But they were very much trying to capture if it's the intent, or if it's the topic, or if it's the stance. There is a degrees, basically, of misinformation alignment. So in order to do that, again, and how to classify is you need to, first of all, it's a kind of a grade of elements of what is, if it's exactly false or if it's true. Very often it falls into perhaps, or it's related. So I don't know if this is an answer to this question. So we found that for the conspiracy, that's why we analyze it to tasks which are, they look like, but they're not exactly. First of all, in order to do that, to ground them, you need to have their tasks which have been defined, the people who work in the misinformation, specific cases, in this case, conspiracy. And then you have different types of misinformation which are not binary, basically. I mean, that's a kind of, yeah.
Thank you so much. I have another question, and this time is for Andrea, Yiannis, and Eleanor. So we had several considerations about the use of watermarking and the importance of sharing intelligence. And often when we discuss fake images or generated AI-generated content, there are some considerations about labeling AI-generated content. So do you think that platforms should be required to label all AI-generated content, or does that risk of creating a false sense of security in users? I'm happy to take this first, unless Yiannis, did you want to?
No, please go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I guess my answer will be more not really based on research or statistics. So it's more of a personal answer, which is that so in terms of the full sense of security,
I'm not certain that there isn't already some form of sense of security when reading, for example, media on social media, which is part of why this is an issue. There is a lot of trust on what is shared online. So having some form of watermarking may help for people who already check that something may be true or false, and it may be that the people who check also will double check that the watermark maybe makes sense or not. The other part, which maybe is more technological, is platforms sort of watermarking AI generated content. I think maybe what the research or development needs to focus on is almost to have a way of having any model automatically create a watermark, and specifically a watermark that cannot be tampered with. And I don't know if this is actually something that is feasible, but it's something that definitely demands a lot of research and work, because it would be, if it is feasible, it would be extremely valuable. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, just wanted to add from my side, we are not directly working on this direction, but also we have seen in the past that, first of all, of course, is something useful and maybe quite, let's say, to an extent, a straightforward solution to add such kind of labels, and it can help in many cases. But the challenges are how easily these labels can be removed, modified, replicated, and then, as you mentioned, create a false sense that, okay, since we see or we do not see these labels, it is an easy way to identify content. So I will say it is one direction for sure, but the challenges exist there, and in general, it's not a, let's say, straightforward solution which by itself can solve the problem.
Yeah, thank you, Virginia, for the question. Also, for us, is one of the direction of our applied research for anti-fraud and anti-disinformation and misinformation. We have a team of applied research in this field that is very yeah, it's very good for our goals.
Many thanks for the answers. We have 3 minutes left, so I think it's almost time to close the panel discussion. I would like to thank, first of all the speakers for the very insightful presentations and interventions. I really realized that there are a lot of synergies, so I hope this is the beginning of a conversation that can bring to more collaborations and discussions about this topic. And of course, today we didn't have representatives from policy, but hopefully that will also be part of the next activities as part of this discussion. I was also informed by AI4People, the tech support of today's panel discussion, that some of the participants experienced some technical issues during the panel discussion. So I'm very sorry for that. Just to let you know that this meeting was recorded, so we will be able to circulate the video, and you will be able to see again some parts of the discussion if you weren't able to participate on Zoom. We will probably circulate more information about the panel discussion. If the speakers want to share also the slides, we will be able to circulate the slides as well. But today I just would like to thank everyone to participating in the discussion, and I hope there will be other opportunities to discuss again about this topic, both from a technical and from a research perspective, because it's a very fascinating but also very timely issue that we have to tackle together. So thank you very much again, and I hope to see you soon.